Kyrie to Chronicles of Ancient Greece, the podcast that delves deep into the fascinating history, myths, and legacies of the ancient Greek world. This is episode 9, Magna Graecia. Okay, so everybody probably noticed that there was no episode last week. The schedule is going to stay a little wobbly for the foreseeable future since, well, life with babies is unpredictable and, as they say, family first. So I'm trying my best to release episodes weekly, but I'm not making any promises on that front. What I can promise, though, is that today's episode is going to literally take us to places we've never been and neither had the ancient Greeks. But before we talk about the where, the who, and the what, we first need to understand why the Greeks left their homeland at all. Ancient sources and modern historians agree. A mix of push and pull factors drove Greek expansion. On the push side, many Greek city-states were running out of resources at home. By the 8th century BC, the population of Greece was booming, and some estimate it grew roughly tenfold between 800 and 400 BC. Fertile land was scarce, and as some scholars note, strong economic growth with the consequent overpopulation of the motherland meant the small Greek terracotta islands simply couldn't support all these people. Just imagine Athens or Corinth bursting at the seams, too many farmers fighting over too little soil. Thucydides, the 5th century historian, bluntly notes that Greek polis often fought for quality soil used in agriculture, raiding their neighbors for good farmland. In this context, the phrase land hunger is more than poetic. The Greeks realized, if we want room to grow olives and drink wine, maybe we should find new plots of land that aren't already terraced to the brim. Environmental crises added fuel. Droughts and famines struck some regions. For example, Herodotus tells how the island of Thera, which is Santorini, suffered severe drought and social unrest, prompting the king to lead colonists off to found Cyrene in North Africa. Politics and social strife also pushed people out. Greek cities often experienced bitter factional fights between oligarchs and democrats, aristocrats and the disenfranchised. When things got too hot, one solution was exile or voluntary exile. A classic example. After Sparta's first Messenian War around 730 BC, the Helots, Spartan serfs, and the Partheni, men born during the war, weren't happy with their second-class status. They rebelled, and when their plot was discovered, the Spartans dispatched the rebel leader, Phalanthus, with a band of exiles to found a new city, Taras, also known as Tarentum, in Italy. Sending hotheads abroad was sometimes a convenient way to cool tensions at home. And then there's the pull side of the equation: economic opportunity and prestige. The Mediterranean was full of ripe prospects, fertile plains, rich forests, and untapped trade routes. Greek traders and adventurers saw a chance to grab timber, metals, and cereal for their cities back home. Establishing a colony often meant establishing a new emporium, essentially a Greek trading post, on the doorstep of eager trading partners or rivals. The location of Magna Graecia was strategic, smack in the middle of the Mediterranean. Colonies here could trade with the native Italic peoples, the Etruscans to the north, and even the Phoenicians and the Carthaginians in Sicily and beyond. It was like putting a Greek branch office in the heart of enemy territory. Speaking of enemy territory, military strategy sometimes played a role too. A mother city might set up a colony as a beachhead to protect shipping lanes or watch for rivals. Think of it as the ancient Greek version of a naval base. In other words, if your trade ships are heading past Sicily, why not put a few friendly hoplites on the shore to make sure nobody's getting sneaky? Cultural motives matter obviously as well. Greeks had a strong sense of cultural identity and pride. By the 8th century BC, Greek city-states saw colonization as a way to export Hellenic life. Founding a colony was almost like planting a flower from the Greek garden in a new pod. The colony would often be officially independent, but it retained Greek language, religion, and institutions. Of course, sometimes the idea of spreading Greek civilization served as propaganda for ambitious cities, but it likely did feel real to many. Once established, these colonies maintained strong cultural ties with the mother city through shared festivals, gods, and even intermarriage. So, to sum up this first part, you could put it into a little equation. Too many Greeks plus too little land plus too many ambitious Greeks equals sailing off to found colonies. Economic, demographic, political, and cultural factors all played their part. It was as if the whole of archaic Greece was having a collective, so if you're so smart, why don't you move out of my polis moment? Except, well, the people actually did. Okay, so the Greeks decided to colonize, but how did a city go about creating a whole new city hundreds of miles away? This was no simple Airbnb listing. The process of founding a colony was surprisingly organized and ritualized, almost like launching an ancient startup company. First, a city-state, called the metropolis or mother city in this context, would debate the idea. The Greeks loved debating. If the assembly or council approved, the polis would appoint a leader known as an oikist. The oikist was the official founder. Think of him as the expedition CEO. This person had hefty responsibilities: finding a good location, organizing the colonists, and setting up the new society. This position also obviously brought with it great prestige, and after the death of an oikist, the colony often honored them with hero cult status for generations. The choice of oikis was serious business for the Greeks. Legendary or practical, a tall tale is that cities even consulted the oracle at Delphi to pick the right man. Before sailing, the oikist might be sent to Delphi with gifts to ask Apollo where to found the colony. One famous example is Phalanthus of Sparta, who got his divine instructions that Tarentum would be his prize. Other colonists, like Battus of Thera, who founded Cyrene, also famously took Delphi's advice, or at least boasted they did. This added religious legitimacy to the whole venture because no one wanted to be blamed if the colony flopped because the gods were angry. Looking at you, Poseidon. Once the oikist was chosen, he had to recruit colonists. How many people? Well, ancient accounts often suggest a few hundred settlers, though exact figures vary by colony. A rough scholarly guess is that around 200 people per foundation were the norm, which, given small city sizes, was a significant fraction of a polis's population. Most colonists were hoplites and their families, plus priests and craftsmen. Everybody had to decide what to take with them: familiar living stakes, sacred objects of the city's patron deity, seats, livestock. Some cities required colonists to give up their land at home, Others let them keep a foot in both worlds. Preparations also, of course, included rituals. The Oikis would often perform sacrifices, set an official founding date, usually in spring or autumn, the two sailing seasons, and sometimes carve a founding stele with a colony's laws or a dedication to the gods. The famous example here is the founding of Thurii near Sybaris in Italy in 4. Its oikistis set up an oracular inscription that later became a precious archaeological artifact. Then came the sailing. Colonists loaded up whatever ships were available, perhaps repurposed warships or sturdy cargo vessels, and headed off. Navigation was pretty simple by our standards, which just was coastal hopping, island to island until you were there. Depending on how good your navigation was, the journey could take days to weeks, depending on the distance and obviously the wind. After landing, the Oikist led the group in surveying the site. A colony's location was often chosen for good farmland, water, and a defensible harbor. The planners sometimes used sacred markers or buried offerings at the city's future center. And then they rolled up their sleeve. They would plow fields, erect defenses, dig wells, and lay out the street grid. The Oikist or settlers introduced institutions, the laws and customs copied from the mother city, and priests set up the first temples. Often, the colonists swore an oath of mutual defense and loyalty, binding the community together. Because all of this took courage and cooperation. Colonists were venturing into foreign territory, sometimes with hostile neighbors. They also carried with them the full weight of their polis traditions. Greek colonies were legally independent, unlike Roman colonies that remained part of Rome. Each colony, or apoika, was a new city-state. It minted its own coins, made its own treaties, and waged its own wars. Yet, culturally, these cities were unmistakably Greek. They had agoras, temple to Zeus and Athena, gymnasia, and even Olympic-style games. So, what does this new world look like on the map? Let's start in southern Italy. Imagine the Italian boot. On the toe in Calabria and heel Apulia, and the so-called instep in between, Greeks founded cities along the coasts. The very first Greek settlement in Italy is generally considered Cumae, founded around 740 BC on the Bay of Naples by settlers from the Euboean cities of Chalcis and Eretria. Cumae guarded the good farmland near Naples and kept watch on the fertile but warlike Italic tribes inland. About the same time, Euboean Greeks also colonized what is today Ischia and parts of Naples, an early trading emporium where Greek merchants mixed with local companions. From Cumae southward, the next wave came. Around 730 to 720 BC, the Achaeans, Greeks from the Peloponnese, founded Sybaris on the Gulf of Taranto and Posidonia, Paestum, further north. These cities exploited the rich plains of Lucania and Campania. Shortly after, Achaeans also founded Croton, not far from Sybaris, and Metapontum to the west. Tarentum was founded in about 706 BC by a group from Sparta. Remarkably, Spartan colonization was extremely rare, but Tarentum grew into the most powerful Greek city in Italy. Over 100 years later, her people even founded colonies of their own, Heraclea, for example. Eastward, Rhegium, which is today Reggio Calabria, was founded by Eritrea settlers around 730 BC at the Strait of Messina, looking across to Sicily. Another notable city in Italy was Elea, founded by Phoenicians around 540 BC on the western coast of Italy. And around 443 BC, Athenians founded Thurii near Sybaris after it had been destroyed. We could honestly fill pages and hours listing every small emporium, but the takeaway is this. By 500 BC, southern Italy was dotted with Greek city-states, from Cumae in Campania to Tarentum in Apulia, each a hub of Hellenic culture in the west. These cities traded grain, olive oil, wine, and pottery with local tribes, and sometimes warred with them. And over time, the Greeks subdued the local population enough to call the area Greater Greece or Magna Graecia. Another one of the most important areas of Greek colonization was Sicily. It was big and rich, but partly controlled by the Phoenicians and the Carthaginians in the west. The east coast, though, was open, and in 734-733 BC, of course, Corinth founded Syracuse on Sicily's southeast coast. Syracuse quickly overshadowed all other Greek cities. It became basically the largest polis in the entire Greek world, as one scholar notes. Within a century, Syracuse was a major force, known for its architects, dramatists, and the ruthless tyrant Gelon. These Greeks on Sicily set up prosperous towns with temples, theaters, and farms around Syracuse. They extracted sulfur and clay from the interior, grew grain and grapes on the plains, and even minted their own currency, which of course is a big sign of independence. But the Syracusans lived amid two rival powers, the Carthaginians in western Sicily and later the rising Roman Republic on the Italian mainland. And, of course, if you've been following the history of Rome, you know that Syracuse plays a major role in the First Punic War. So, the Greek colonists have landed, built their walls, and named their new home. What next? We might assume they simply recreated Athens or Sparta down there, and to an extent that's true. Their institutions, language, and gods were definitely Greek. However, as we've already mentioned, each colony developed its own twist on Greek governance and culture. Take Tarentum, for example. It was unique in having a hereditary monarchy ruled by kings descended from Spartan lineage. Syracuse started under a line of kings turned tyrants, and Croton, on the other hand, was known for an early proto-democratic constitution influenced by the Pythagorean community there. Cumae, on the other hand, reportedly retained an aristocratic structure with two Prytanes sharing power. The colonists often continued sending ambassadors and delegations back to their mother city, though the political link was informal at best. Being a Greek colony basically meant, well, the parents are away, we're on our own. Even with this independence, though, religion tied all the Greek city-states together. Colonists brought statues of mother city gods and continued sacred calendars. They founded temples in Greek architectural styles. The big Doric temples of Paestum still stand as a legacy, for example. They held pan-Hellenic games and worshipped Zeus, Apollo, Athena, and the like. In some cases, they even co-opted local deities under Greek names. Socially, colonists tended to be full Greek citizens. The indigenous Italic people were often around them or intermingling in commerce. In some cities early on, local people were even enslaved or subjugated. And as one source bluntly says, The Greek colonists eventually subdued the local population and stamped their identity on the region. Yet, as often is, many Greeks mixed with locals through trade, friendship, and even marriage. By the classical era, some Italic aristocrats were effectively Hellenized or at least eager to join Greek civic life. For instance, at Rhegium, locals adopted Greek customs and some became citizens. The result was a uniquely blended culture, Greek in language and politics, but with local accents in art and dialects. This Hellenic influence lasted even until the Romans came to the area. By the 1st century BC, as the Roman rule was extending, the region's Greek cities still retained Hellenic language and administration. Our old friend Cicero, the Roman orator, even recalls Greek-speaking Sicilians in his day. The cultural interaction between Rome and Greece was deep, and we'll get to it, but suffice it to say now that Rome itself borrowed a lot from Greek religion, art, and learning through its encounters with Magna Graecia. And also, by the way, Magna Graecia is where our podcast is going to end, with the Roman conquest of Corinth in 146 BC. But that's for the future. The very, very, very distant future at this point. But for now, we'll bring our focus back to the, present of Magna Graecia. Let's now look at two of the pillars of the region, Syracuse and Tarentum. These cities exemplify the colonial saga in different ways, one on Sicily, one on the Italian mainland. Let's start with Syracuse. Founded in 733 BC by Corinth, Syracuse began as a small settlement on Sicily's eastern coast. The Corinthians sent colonists under the oikist Archias. Early Syracuse was likely oligarchic, ruled by a select few aristocrats, but over time internal struggles emerged. By the late 6th century BC, Syracuse was led by three tyrants known as the Dinomenids, Gelon and his brothers Hieron and Thrasybulos. Under Gelon and Hieron, Syracuse transformed. Gelon defeated Carthage and built up Syracuse as the richest, most powerful Greek city west of the Peloponnese. So, Syracuse in the 5th century BC was basically Sicily's hegemon. Its navy was strong, its architecture grand, and its theaters so famous that the playwright Aeschylus even wrote tragedies here. Politically, Syracuse swung between tyranny and more democratic rule. After the Dinomenid era, the city had periods of popular government and aristocratic rule. One thing, though, was constant. Syracuse had a will to power. In 415 BC, during the Peloponnesian War, Syracuse became the target of Athens. The Athenians launched a grand expedition to capture Syracuse, with Thucydides recording their motivations. Syracuse was wealthy, potentially an ally, and a foothold in the West. Syracuse citizens, though, refused to give up easily and prepared for the Athenian assault. According to legend, Archimedes the engineer even designed catapults to defend the city. And in 413 BC, the Athenians were utterly defeated. Syracuse's size and resources made it basically a mini-empire. It even founded its own colonies, for example, Agrigento, in 582 BC, and Camarina later on. Syracuse minted coins bearing the figure of Arethusa, its local nymph queen, and temples to Athena survive in its old city. By the late Classical Age, rulers like Dionysius the Elder took the title of king and built up a fortress. And yet, even at its grandest, Syracuse remained staunchly Greek in identity. They spoke Doric Greek, celebrated Greek gods, and competed in pan-Hellenic games. Tarentum, on the other hand, was quite a different animal. Founded around 706 BC by the Parthians from Sparta, it was Sparta's only colony. Usually, the Spartans forbade colonization, but the social upheaval after the Messenian War gave them no choice. The historian Strabo recounts how the Spartan council sent Phantalus to consult the oracle and establish Taras in fertile Apulia. Taras being Tarentum, of course. Growing quickly and exploiting the broad plains of Apulia, unlike most Greek cities, Taras kept a monarchy. Its first kings claimed descent from Phalanthus. The community was tight-knit. Spartan traditions of communal meals and agoge training lingered long after. By the 5th century BC, Tarentum was one of the wealthiest cities in Italy. Its natural harbor meant trade with the Illyrians and with fellow Italiate Greeks. And also, Tarentum founded a colony of its own, Heraclea, around 432 BC. Socially, Taras had two classes: the Spartiates, full citizens of Spartan stock, and the Helot descendants, non-citizen residents. This recreated the old Spartan dual society in Italy. Periodically, there were tensions, of course. Around 480 BC, a group of Tarentine young nobles even plotted to overthrow the monarchist system, showing that even in these colonies, politics and power struggles mirrored the city-states of Greece. Taras was also militarily active. In the late 4th century BC, it famously fought Rome twice with the help of King Pyrrhus of Epirus, giving us the phrase Pyrrhic victory. But that's really a little bit beyond our scope for now. We'll get to it though. The point is, Tarentum remained a fiercely Greek city until Rome finally pressed in. Its heritage endures today. The modern city of Taranto in Apulia still has a Greek district, and local traditions remember the Spartan founders even today. Eventually, though, the cities of Magna Graecia fell victim to the invading Roman Republic, and their once proud city-states now became Roman subsidiaries. That does not mean, however, that Magna Graecia was lost for the ages. Its legacy even lasts until this day. Magna Graecia became a heartland of Hellenic civilization in the West. Greek art, architecture, and religion blossomed here. The Doric temple at Paestum and Selinus still tower as UNESCO sites. Sculpture in Magna Graecia evolved unique styles. The so-called Paestum tombs had exquisite wall frescoes, blending myth with local life. Intellectual life also thrived. Many historians and philosophers came from Italy-Sicily. More broadly, though, Greek influence permeated native societies. Over generations, the local Oenotrians, Lucanians, and others learned Greek ways. They adopted the Greek alphabet for their language, which in turn, of course, influenced the Latin alphabet. They ate olives and drank wine. The historian Strabo noted in the 1st century BC that the cities of southern Italy were more Greek than those of Asia Minor, and that even Roman cities in the area still felt a strong Greek identity. In fact, the Latin poet Virgil refers to, and I swear I'm going to butcher this, Graecia capta ferum victorem capit, which is Latin for captive Greek took captive her rude conqueror. I am pretty sure my Latin teachers from school are right now feeling a shudder run over their back. Whether it's good or bad, that's up to them. This quote from Virgil, though, illustrates how even after Rome conquered Greece, Greek culture had already conquered Roman hearts. Magna Graecia was a big part of that. Economically, the colonial networks helped kickstart cross-Mediterranean exchange. The colonies of Italy became trading hubs. Greek colonies proliferated along the coasts as emporia, controlling sea routes and facilitating commerce. For example, Greek coins were used as far away as Egypt. The concept of citizenship also traveled. The idea of being a citizen of a state, with political rights of course, was essential exported to the West. This later influenced Roman ideas of citizenship in their republic. Politically, the story goes on. By the 4th and 3rd centuries BC, Rome began to loom on the scene. Initially, Roman interest in the Greek south was limited, but after Pyrrhus of Epirus helped Taras resist Rome in the 280s, Romans realized Magna Graecia was important. Little by little, in the Pyrrhic Wars and later conflicts, Rome absorbed the Greek cities of Italy. Yet, even under Roman rule, Greek influence remained. The Romans set up colonies in the Italian peninsula in Greek style. They did have coloniae, but those were more military, not Greek cities. Culturally, though, Roman elites like Cicero and Scipio surrounded themselves with Greek art and philosophy, much of it from the Greek south. The long-term legacy also lies in the persistence of Greek language in Magna Graecia. Remarkably, pockets of Greek-speaking Italians survived all the way through the Middle Ages. And even today, in some villages of Calabria and Salento, you can find people speaking a dialect called Greco, a remnant of ancient Greek. Festivals and place names in southern Italy remind of us Greeks as well. The Apulian red wine, for example, was famous in antiquity as Calabrian wine. In other words, the Greek colonists may have boarded ships to escape a crowded island, but they ended up populating and Hellenizing the Mediterranean for millennia. When we walk through the ruins of a temple in Sicily or pronounce a Greek name in Calabria, we're walking in the footsteps of those ancient Greek wanderers. And of course, one thing's for sure, if we had an ancient travel blog, it would say, Magna Graecia, sun, sea, and columns. 10 of 10 would colonize again.